The night was colder than usual, and the wind carried dust across the broken streets. Most people had gone inside, shutting their doors and windows tight. The human traveler walked alone, his boots crunching against the stones as he searched. For an inn, he was tired after a long day of work, his back heavy with tools and his coat worn thin. He only wanted a warm bed and a little food before dawn, but then, from the shadows of an abandoned building, a weak voice called out, "Please." He stopped and looked around, his eyes narrowing. The voice was trembling. Almost too soft to hear, but it carried a strange desperation that made his heart beat faster. From the corner, a figure appeared, small and shaking. It was a woman. No, not quite human. Her skin had a faint shimmer, pale and bluish under the moonlight. Her eyes were wide, tired, and filled with years of suffering. She stepped forward slowly, as if afraid he might run from her. Her clothes were torn, barely enough to shield her from the biting wind. "Please," she whispered again, "just one night in your warm bed." The human froze, unsure if he had heard her correctly. A request like that was strange, dangerous even. But the way she spoke, her voice cracking, made it sound less like a demand and more like a final cry for life. He looked around. No one else was on the street. No guard, no merchant, no curious eyes. It was just him and this fragile stranger. He studied her carefully, wondering if it was a trick. There were always stories about thieves pretending to be beggars. But there was no strength in her, no hint of deceit, only hunger and sorrow. "You don't even know me," he said slowly. His voice guarded. "Why would you ask me that?" Her lips trembled, her breath forming small clouds in the cold night air. "For 10 years, she said, her words heavy like stones. "I've never had a bed, not once." She lowered her head, as if ashamed of her own confession. "I slept on cages, on stone floors, on dirt, but never on something soft, never on something warm." Her hands clutched her thin cloth tighter around her body. "Just one night. Please." The human felt his chest tighten. 10 years. She had said 10 years without comfort, without dignity. Who could survive like that? What kind of life was that? But still, a part of him hesitated. She was alien, different from him, different from the humans of his world. What if helping her brought trouble? Yet her eyes, those tired, shining eyes, held no danger, only pleading. They were the eyes of someone who had been broken again and again, someone who had learned to stop hoping, yet somehow still dared to whisper one last request. The human sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You don't even know my name," he muttered, trying to hide the warmth growing in his heart. Her head lifted slightly, and for the first time he noticed how young she seemed beneath the exhaustion. She wasn't much older than him. Maybe just a few years, but life had stolen her youth, leaving her frail. "You don't need a name," she whispered back. "You only need kindness." Her words hit him harder than he expected. Kindness, such a simple thing. And yet here was someone begging for it as if it was the rarest treasure. He stared at her for a long moment, torn between fear and compassion. The silence stretched until even the wind seemed to stop. Finally, he stepped forward, just enough for his shadow to fall over her small frame. "Stand up," he said firmly, though his voice softened at the edges. Her eyes widened, as if she expected him to turn away instead, but she pushed herself up slowly, her legs weak, her body shaking with every movement. He reached out a hand, hesitant at first, then steadier when she did not pull away. Her skin was cold to the touch, colder than the night itself. He felt her fingers clutch his hand with surprising strength, as if she feared he might vanish if she let go. "Come with me," he said at last, his tone carrying both warning and promise. "I can't give you forever, but tonight you will not sleep on the ground." Her lips parted, but no words came out, only a sound that was half sob, Half-laughter tears glistened in her strange eyes as she whispered, "Thank you. Thank you." They walked together through the quiet street. Her steps slow, his steady, their shadows stretching long in the pale moonlight. For the first time in 10 years, she was not walking alone. For the first time in 10 years, the hope of warmth was within reach. The human did not know who she truly was, or why she had suffered so long, but something in his heart told him this was only the beginning. A single act of kindness had pulled him into a story far larger than himself, and somewhere in the darkness, unseen eyes were already watching. Waiting for what would come next, the fire in the small room flickered weakly, throwing soft light. Against the wooden walls, the human had given her his bed and sat on the chair nearby. Watching in silence for a long time, she did not move, as if afraid that even touching the blanket might be forbidden. Her hands trembled when she finally laid them over the cloth, feeling its warmth seep into her fingers. Her eyes closed for a brief moment, and a faint smile touched her lips, a smile that had been lost for many years. The human spoke quietly. "You said 10 years without a bed." His voice was calm, but it carried both confusion and curiosity. She opened her eyes and looked at him, her expression distant. "Yes," she whispered. 10 long years." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Why? Who would deny someone something so simple? Her throat tightened, her breath catching in her chest. Memories she had buried came rushing back, chains on her wrists, cold stone floors, the sound of mocking laughter. She pressed her lips together before answering, "Because they wanted me broken." The human frowned. "Broken?" Her gaze dropped to the floor, and her voice grew softer. "They locked me in cages. Treated me like an animal." Her hands clutched the blanket tightly. "I was not allowed warmth, not allowed rest." Her words trembled, each one heavy with pain. "If I closed my eyes too long, they woke me with strikes. If I tried to curl against the cold, they pulled the blanket away." She paused, her shoulders shaking. "It was not just about keeping me alive, it was about making me forget what it felt like to live." The human's fists tightened on his knees. He felt anger rising inside him, anger at people he had never met. 10 years of suffering, 10 years stolen from her life. How could anyone do that? "Who were they?" he asked, his tone sharp. Her eyes darted up to his, filled with fear. For a moment she hesitated, then shook her head. "Not yet," she whispered. "I cannot say. Not now." Silence fell between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire. The human studied her carefully, realizing that her fear was not only for herself, she was protecting him too. If she revealed the truth, he might become a target. Already, by letting her in, he had stepped into danger. "You don't trust me fully," he said at last. Her lips parted, then closed again. Finally, she nodded slowly. "I want to, but trust is something I lost long ago." He leaned back in his chair, sighing. Fair enough, he thought. No one could live 10 years in chains and still trust easily. But still, he noticed something in her eyes, a flicker of hope, faint but alive. She had asked him for only one night. But her voice carried something deeper. It was not only warmth she needed. It was proof that kindness still existed. After a while, he asked gently, "How did you escape?" Her body tensed at the question. She turned her head toward the window where the night stretched endless and dark. "Escape," she whispered bitterly. "It was not escape. It was being thrown away." His eyes narrowed. "Thrown away." She nodded, her voice heavy with shame. "They decided I was no longer useful. No longer worth keeping." Her hands curled into fists against the blanket. "They cast me out like garbage, expecting me to die in the streets." She swallowed hard. "But I did not die. I walked, I crawled, I begged. And still I lived." The human felt a chill creep over him. This woman had survived cruelty that would have destroyed most. Yet here she was, sitting before him, trembling but unbroken. There was a strength in her suffering, a quiet defiance that her captors had failed to crush. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he stood and pulled another blanket from a shelf, draping it gently over her shoulders. She froze, her body stiff. But when she felt the warmth, she let out a small gasp, tears welling in her eyes. No one has done this for me in years, she whispered, her voice breaking. The human said nothing, only met her gaze with quiet resolve. He did not know her story in full. He did not know the names of those who had hurt her, but he knew one thing. Tonight, she was safe. Outside, the wind howled louder, rattling the window shutters. Somewhere in the dark streets, unseen footsteps echoed and then faded. The human did not notice, but the woman did, her eyes narrowing with sudden fear. She knew that safety was never simple, never permanent. Her past was not done chasing her, and anyone who stood near her would soon be caught in its shadow. She pulled the blanket tighter and whispered under her breath, "Please, let this night last." But deep in her heart, she feared it would be the beginning of something far more dangerous. The night dragged on slowly, the fire burning low. The human sat in the chair, his eyes half closed, but his mind refused to rest. Across the room, the alien woman slept lightly, her breaths shallow, as if she expected to be shaken awake at any moment. Even in sleep, her fingers clutched the blanket tightly, afraid it might be taken from her. He watched her quietly, wondering who she really was and what kind of enemies would hunt her. At dawn, the sky outside the window grew pale gray. He rose from his chair, stretching his stiff shoulders. For a moment, he thought about leaving before she woke. It would be easier to walk away, forget her story, and avoid the danger that surely followed her. He was only a traveler, not a hero, not a fighter of other people's battles. But when he turned to the door, her voice stopped him. "Are you leaving?" she whispered, her eyes half open, staring at him. The weakness in her voice was like a thread pulling on his heart. He hesitated, his hand on the wooden doorframe. "I should," he muttered. "I don't even know your name, and I don't know who might be following you." She sat up slowly, her hair falling around her face. "You are right," she said, her voice low. "Danger will come if you keep me near." Her eyes lowered to the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. "But if you send me out, I will not survive another night." The human clenched his jaw, torn between his own safety and the image of her trembling figure in the cold. She had begged him for one night, and he had given it, but was that enough? Was he ready to send her back into the same world that had chained her for 10 years? He walked back to the table and poured water into a small cup. Handing it to her, she took it with both hands, sipping slowly, her eyes never leaving his. There was no trick in them, no hidden scheme, only fear and hope. "What do you want from me?" he asked finally, his tone heavier than before. Her lips parted. She did not answer at once. Instead, she stared down into the water as if afraid of her own words. "I want nothing you cannot give," she whispered. "I want only to breathe without chains, to sleep without fear, to wake without pain." Her words cut into him, sharper than any blade. He realized she wasn't asking for riches, nor power, nor anything impossible. She only wanted the smallest things in life, the things he had taken for granted every single day. He leaned back, running a hand through his messy hair. "You make it sound simple," he said. "But if the people who hurt you are still out there, helping you will not be simple." Her gaze met his again, stronger this time. "I know," she said softly. "That is why I did not ask for forever. I asked for one night." The room fell silent again, the weight of her words pressing down on both of them. The human felt trapped by his own conscience. If he left her, he would carry the memory of her broken plea forever. If he stayed, he risked. Being pulled into a storm he did not understand. A knock on the door shattered the silence. It was soft at first, then louder, firm. The woman stiffened instantly, her eyes wide with terror. The human froze, staring at the door. "Who is it?" he called, his voice steady, though his heart raced. No answer came, only another knock, slow, deliberate. The woman shook her head, her lips moving soundlessly. "Don't open it." He stepped back, his hand instinctively reaching for the knife strapped to his belt. The knocking stopped, followed by the sound of footsteps moving away. Fading into the morning, the woman clutched the blanket tighter, her whole body trembling. "They have found me," she whispered, her voice shaking. They never stopped searching. The human's breath caught. This was at the moment he had feared. He could let her go, push her out into the streets, and save himself from whatever danger hunted her. Or he could stand beside her and face the storm. She turned her eyes to him, filled with despair. "I will leave now," she said. "I will not drag you down with me." Her voice broke on the last word, as if even saying it hurt her. She rose slowly, her legs weak, but her determination stronger. It was the strength of someone used to walking away from kindness before it was stolen from her. The human stepped forward, blocking her path to the door. "No," he said firmly. "If they want you, they'll have to go through me first." She stared at him, stunned. Her lips trembled, and for the first time, real tears spilled down her face. "You would do that for me?" she whispered. He nodded once, gripping the handle of his knife tighter. "I don't know why, but something tells me you've suffered enough." The woman sank back onto the bed, covering her face with her hands. She had begged only for one night, but now a human stranger had made a choice that could change everything. Outside, the world was waking, but inside that small room, a fragile bond had been forged. The human had chosen compassion over safety, and with that choice, both their lives would never be the same again. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and deep purple. The human closed the shutters of the small room and checked the lock on the door twice. Ever since the knock that morning, he had felt eyes following them. The streets had grown quiet. Too quiet, as if the whole town held its breath. He glanced at the woman resting on his bed, her body wrapped in blankets, her eyes still wary even. When she tried to smile, "You should eat," he said softly. Placing bread and a small bowl of soup on the table, she shook her head at first, her hands trembling, but the smell made her stomach tighten with hunger. Slowly, she reached for the food, her fingers shaking as if she expected someone to slap it away, and she quickly wiped them before he noticed. But he did notice. He noticed everything. He leaned against the wall, his knife at his side, and asked, "Do they always find you this fast?" She paused mid-bite, lowering the bread slowly. Her voice dropped to a whisper, "Yes. No matter where I go, no matter how far I run, the shadows follow." Her words sent a chill down his spine. "Why?" He pressed, his tone firm. Her eyes flickered toward him, then away. "You wouldn't believe me," she said quietly. "Most don't." He crossed his arms, his gaze unshaken. "Try me." The woman's lips trembled. Then she spoke. "They fear me," she whispered. "But not because of what I am now." Her hands gripped the edge of the blanket tightly. "I was born into a clan that once held power, real power. But when betrayal came, I lost everything. Those who turned against me wanted me erased, forgotten, so they denied me even the smallest things: warmth, food, a bed." Her voice cracked. "They wanted me to vanish from the world, as if I never existed." The human felt a surge of anger again. 10 years of cruelty. 10 years of being treated like nothing. No one deserved that. But before he could speak, a noise outside the window made him freeze, a faint crunch of gravel. Footsteps moving slowly, but deliberately. The woman stiffened immediately, her face pale. "They're here," she whispered, her eyes darting toward the door. The human moved quickly, dousing the fire so the room plunged into dim shadows. The only light came from the thin crack under the door, where moonlight slipped through. They waited in silence, the sound of footsteps. Drawing closer, then came a soft scrape against the doorframe, like fingers brushing the wood. The human's grip tightened on his knife, his body tense. "Stay behind me," he whispered to her. But she shook her head, whispering back, "If they see you with me, they'll kill you too." Before he could answer, the doorknob rattled. Slowly, testing the lock, his breath caught, his heart pounding, the lock held. But a low voice drifted through the wood, cruel and mocking. "You can't hide forever," it hissed. "We will take her back, and this time she won't live long enough to beg." The woman's body shook, and she pressed her hand to her mouth to silence her sob. The human's rage burned, his every muscle screaming to fight. But he knew opening the door would mean disaster. The voice outside laughed softly, the sound chilling. Then footsteps retreated, fading into the night. Silence returned. Heavy and suffocating, the woman collapsed back on the bed, tears spilling freely now. "They'll come again," she whispered. "They always do." The human crouched beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "Then let them come," he said firmly, his eyes burning with determination. "They will not take you while I still draw breath." Her eyes widened, her tears mixing with a fragile smile. "You don't even know me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't need to," he answered. "I know enough to see you've suffered enough already." The rest of the night passed in silence. But it was not peaceful. Every creak of the wood, every whisper of wind outside felt like danger. The woman slept only in brief moments. Waking at every sound, the human did not sleep at all. He sat by the door, knife in hand, listening, waiting. When the first light of dawn touched the sky, he finally allowed himself a breath of relief. But deep in his heart, he knew this was only the beginning. The shadows had found them, and they would not stop. If he wanted to protect her, he would need more than a locked door and a simple knife. He would need strength, courage, and perhaps even allies. The woman stirred, her eyes heavy but alert. "Why didn't you run when you had the chance?" she asked softly. The human met her gaze with steady resolve. "Because I made a choice," he said, his voice low but certain. "And I don't turn back once I've chosen." Her lips trembled, her breath shaky, for the first time in 10 years. She felt something stronger than fear-hope, and in that moment, as the sunlight broke through the shutters, she believed that maybe, just maybe, she was no longer alone. The day passed slowly. Every hour filled with tension. The human stayed close to the window, keeping an eye on the street, while the alien woman sat quietly on the edge of the bed, her hands twisting the blanket nervously. She had been silent for most of the morning, her eyes distant, as if her mind was trapped in memories she could not escape. Finally, he turned toward her and spoke. "If I am to protect you, I need to know who is after you, and why." His voice was calm but firm. She flinched, her eyes darting away. "I told you before," she whispered. "You wouldn't believe me." He stepped closer, kneeling so he could look directly into her eyes. "Try me," he said again, his tone steady. "I already believe you've suffered. I've seen it with my own eyes, so tell me the rest." Her lips trembled as she breathed out slowly. For a long time she said nothing, and he began to think she would never answer. But then, her voice broke the silence, low and filled with pain. "My name is not worthless like they made me believe," she whispered. "I am the last daughter of the House of Sereth." The human blinked, confused. He had heard the name before, whispers among traders and soldiers, an ancient alien clan, once known for their strength, wisdom, and influence. But the House of Sereth was said to have fallen years ago, destroyed by rivals and swallowed by history. Your royalty. He asked slowly, almost disbelieving. Her laugh was bitter, sharp like glass. Royalty? She repeated. Royalty has power, wealth, armies. I have nothing, only scars and chains. She turned her head, exposing faint marks on her neck. And wrists, old burns and bruises that time had not fully healed. This is what remains of the House of Sereth, she said coldly. Me, a beggar with no bed, no freedom, hunted like an animal. The human's chest tightened, he realized. Then why her enemies chased her so fiercely? It was not only hatred, it was fear. If even one heir of Seruth survived, she could become a symbol, a spark that could ignite rebellion. They want you erased, he said quietly, more to himself than to her. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. For 10 years they have tried. 10 years of breaking me down. They made sure I had no comfort, no rest, because they feared that if I stood tall again, others would remember my name. Her voice cracked. They feared that hope could return. The human clenched his fists, anger burning through him. To think that this fragile woman was once part of a great house, and that her suffering was not random cruelty but a carefully planned destruction. They will not succeed, he said. Firmly, his voice stronger than he felt. Her eyes flickered toward him, searching his face for any sign of doubt. You speak as if you can stop them, she whispered. But you are only one man. Maybe, he admitted. But I am one man who has already made a choice. He stood, pacing the room as his mind raced. You asked me for one night, and I gave it. But now I see, this is bigger than that. He turned to her, his gaze sharp. If I walk away now, I become like those who watched you suffer and did nothing. I cannot do that. Her breath caught, her body trembling. No one had ever spoken like that for her. Not in 10 years. She lowered her face into her hands, her shoulders shaking as tears streamed freely. I do not deserve this, she whispered. I am broken. I am nothing. Why risk yourself for me? The human stepped forward and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. You are not nothing, he said firmly. They tried to make you believe that, but they failed. The fact that you are still alive after all they've done to you proves that you are stronger than they ever imagined. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. For the first time in years, she saw herself reflected not as a victim, but as someone worth saving. His words struck deep, awakening something long buried inside her, a spark of the Sereth blood she thought was gone. But before the moment could settle, a noise outside shattered it, voices in the street, harsh and commanding. The human moved quickly to the window, peering through the crack in the shutter. His jaw tightened. Armored figures were moving from house to house, searching. They were close. Too close. Her face turned pale, her body trembling. They found me, she whispered, panic rising. In her voice, the human turned to her quickly, his expression hard but calm. Then we move now, he said. Before they knock on this door. She stared at him, stunned. You would flee with me? Yes, he said, without hesitation, because now I know who you are. And I will not let them break you again. Her tears spilled once more. But this time they were not only of fear, they were of something stronger, something warmer. Then she whispered, her voice shaking but firm. If I survive this, if I live another day, I will live not as a beggar, but as Sereth, the name they tried to erase. The human nodded, his knife at his side, his eyes sharp as steel. Good, he said. Because if they want to take you again, they will find they are no longer facing a broken woman. He opened the door quietly, the cool night air rushing in. They are facing both of us, and with that, they stepped into the shadows of the street together, hunted but unbroken. The secret was revealed, and the fight for survival had only just begun. The night air was sharp as they stepped out of the small room. The woman clung to the blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her feet moving quickly to match the human's pace. The street was quiet, but not empty. Far in the distance, torches burned as armored figures moved from door to door, searching. Every shout, every slam of a door being opened echoed like thunder in her ears. The human kept his eyes sharp, guiding her through narrow alleys. "Stay close," he whispered, his hand steady on the hilt of his knife. She nodded, her breath trembling, her body weak, but her spirit burning stronger than before. She had revealed her truth to him, and he had not turned away. But now that truth carried a heavy price. They slipped into the shadow of an abandoned stable, crouching behind broken beams. The human peeked through the cracks, watching as soldiers marched closer. Their armor bore the mark of a powerful house. "Enemies of Sereth, these are not common hunters," he muttered. "These are trained men. They won't stop until they have you." The woman's eyes filled with fear. "Then leave me," she whispered. "If they catch me alone, they will not bother with you." The human turned sharply, his jaw set. "I already told you," he said, his voice low but fierce. "If they want you, they'll have to go through me first." Her heart ached at his words. No one had ever spoken for her like that, not in 10 long years of chains and exile. The kindness he gave now felt heavier than gold, and she knew it would cost him dearly. The sound of boots echoed closer, torches glowing brighter as soldiers spread across the street. The human's grip tightened on his knife, but he knew a blade against armored men was almost useless. They needed more than courage, they needed escape. He spotted a cart, half buried in the shadows, its wheels broken but still tall enough to hide behind. He gestured for her to move, and they slipped quietly toward it. Every step felt like walking on glass, the smallest sound threatening to give them away. But fate was cruel as they crouched. Behind the cart, a soldier's torch swung near, the light catching the woman's pale face for a heartbeat. "Here?" The soldier roared, his voice cutting through the night. "She's here." Panic surged in her chest, but before she could move, the human grabbed her hand and pulled her into a run. The street erupted with shouts, armored boots pounding against stone as soldiers gave chase. "Go!" the human urged, pulling her through a maze of alleys. Her breath burned in her lungs, her legs weak. But his strength kept her moving. Arrows clattered against walls, one slicing through the air so close it tore the edge of her blanket. The human shoved her around a corner, pressing her against the wall as arrows flew past. He drew his knife, standing between her and the soldiers, his eyes fierce in the torchlight. The first soldier rounded the corner, blade raised. The human struck quickly, his knife slashing across the man's arm, forcing him back. Another soldier charged, and the human kicked the torch from his hand, plunging the alley into darkness. Chaos broke out, shouts filling the night. "Run!" The human shouted, pushing her forward again. She stumbled, but obeyed, tears streaming down her face as she realized he was fighting not for himself, but for her. The price of his kindness was now blood. They reached the edge of the town, where broken fences marked the fields beyond. The woman gasped for air, clutching her chest, her legs threatening to give out. We can't escape them," she whispered. "There are too many." The human caught her shoulders, his breath ragged, but his eyes blazing. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "They may have numbers, but they don't have what we have: your will to live and my will to fight." Behind them, soldiers poured from the streets, their torches lighting the night like fire. The human stood tall, pulling her behind him. His knife gleamed, small compared to their swords, but in his hands it carried something stronger than steel: determination. "Do you see now?" she whispered through her tears, her voice breaking. "They chase me because of my name, but you? You suffer because you chose me." He glanced at her, his expression hard but gentle. "Then let them come," he said. "If this is the price of kindness, I will pay it." The soldiers closed in, their armor clanking, their blades ready. The woman's heart pounded as she clutched the blanket tighter, her tears falling freely for the first time in 10 years. She was not facing death alone. The human stood before her like a wall against the storm, and in that moment, as the soldiers raised their torches and prepared to strike, she felt something stir inside her, something she thought was lost. The blood of Sereth, the fire of her house, burned faintly in her chest once more. His kindness had awakened it, and though fear gripped her, hope had returned. The clash was moments away, the night heavy with tension. The human's choice had already been made, and he would not turn back. Whatever came next, plain or death wit would be shared, and perhaps that was the greatest price of all. The night burned with torches as the soldiers closed in. The human stood tall, his knife steady in his hand. His eyes locked on the advancing figures behind him. The woman clung to the blanket around her shoulders, her body shaking, the weight of 10 years of suffering pressed on her heart. But now she was not alone. The first soldier lunged, steel flashing in the firelight. The human moved fast, sidestepping and striking low. His knife slashing across the man's leg, the soldier roared, stumbling back. But more came forward, their blades raised high. The woman gasped, fear choking her. She wanted to scream, to beg him to run, but her voice broke before it left her throat. She could only watch as he fought, every movement fueled not by skill, but by sheer determination. He was only one man, yet he stood against many. "Why do you fight for me?" she whispered to herself, her tears falling. And then she remembered his words, "If they want you, they'll have to go through me first." The soldiers pressed harder, their numbers overwhelming. The human staggered as a sword cut across his shoulder. Blood staining his coat, he gritted his teeth, refusing to fall. His body screamed in pain, but he pushed forward, striking again and again. "Go," he shouted back to her. "Run while you can." But her legs refused to move. For 10 years she had run. For 10 years she had been hunted. But tonight, something inside her changed. "No," she cried, her voice breaking through the chaos. The soldiers paused for a heartbeat, surprised by the strength in her voice. Her trembling body straightened, her eyes burning with sudden fire. "I will not run anymore." The human glanced back at her, stunned. Her face glowed in the torchlight. No longer just a beggar's face, but something more. The heir of Sereth, the last daughter who refused to be erased. The soldiers sneered, raising their weapons to strike. At her instead, the human leaped forward, blocking them, his blade flashing in desperation. But even as he fought, the woman stepped beside him. Her voice clear and sharp, "I am Sereth," she cried, her words echoing through the night, "and I am not broken." The soldiers faltered, hesitation flickering in their eyes. For 10 years they had been told she was nothing, worthless, forgotten, yet here she stood, alive, unbroken. And claiming her name with fire, some stepped back, doubt in their hearts. The human pressed forward, his strikes fiercer now. The hesitation in their ranks gave him the strength he needed. One soldier fell, then another. The rest pulled back, muttering, their confidence shaken. Their leader growled, pointing his blade at her. "You are finished, Sereth. You cannot fight us forever." Her chin lifted, her eyes steady. "No," she said, her voice calm. "But neither can you fight hope forever." The leader snarled, raising his sword for a final strike. But before he could swing, the human drove his knife into the ground. Between them, his voice like iron. "Enough," he said, his tone cutting through the night. "You've had 10 years to break her, and you failed. Now leave." or face the same fate as the ones who already fell. The silence was heavy. The soldiers shifting uneasily. Finally, the leader cursed, signaling his men to retreat, one by one. They faded back into the darkness, their torches disappearing in two. The distance, the fight was over for now. The woman collapsed to her knees. Tears streaming down her face, her body trembled, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. The human staggered beside her, blood on his shoulder, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. You did not run," he whispered, his lips curving into the faintest smile. She looked up at him, her tears shining. "You gave me more than a night in a warm bed," she said softly. "You gave me back my name. My strength, my hope." He sank beside her, his body heavy, his knife falling to the ground. "And you," he said with a tired laugh, "gave me a reason to fight." They sat together in the quiet that followed, the stars watching silently above them. For a long time, neither spoke, only listened to the sound of each other's breathing. At last, she reached out, taking his blood-stained hand in hers. "Not just one night," she whispered, her voice breaking but filled with warmth, "but every night, as long as you live." The human turned his head, meeting her gaze. Her eyes no longer looked like the eyes of a broken beggar. They looked like the eyes of someone reborn, someone alive again. And in that moment, he knew he had made the right choice. The dawn came slowly, painting the horizon gold. The world would not be safe for them, not yet, but for the first time in 10 years. The woman slept soundly, her head resting against his shoulder, and the human sat awake beside her, guarding her with tired but unyielding eyes. A promise had been made, unspoken but true. She would never again beg for a single night of warmth, because he had given her something greater. A warm bed forever, and a place where she would never be alone again.